Since last Epoch.
All right. All right. I have a couple videos I want to go through today. My nose. I have a couple videos. We're going to start with this last Epoch ruined everything for me. We're going to go through some of these and we'll see. I do want to go through some tier lists today. Maybe make a few of those, but we'll see. We'll see.
Epoch released, I've been playing pretty consistently over that time, basically getting in a few hours each day in between work and playing other stuff. Really not been in a rush to accomplish anything in particular. I haven't felt the need or pressure to like reach max level as fast as possible and clear through all the end game. Just really haven't been all too bothered. Just enjoying playing the game really. I've been steadily leveling my Falconer while hopping on alts here and there in between when I want to do something other than grinding.
Leveling in this game is a lot faster, I feel, than most other games. I feel like you hit the end game loop actually very quick, comparatively to say D4. I mean, to be fair, the D4 end game loop really is just dungeons and then Duriel anyway, so you're doing that at fucking 15, 20. But if you can get into like actually getting into the end game loop in this game is very quick because you level up so much faster than most other ARPGs. Like you'll hit like 40 or 50 in a few hours in this game, assuming you don't get, you know, hard locked by Lagan and Majasa or Mahasa.
Monoliths and praying for best in slot drops. And while I will say I do feel like things are slowing down a bit in terms of my motivation to keep on grinding, I will probably move on from the game soon. Lots of other stuff I want to play right now, but all in all,
yeah, I mean the end game in this really is just empowered monoliths, which I mean, like let's be honest, you run out of stuff to do fairly quick because the game doesn't have a set end game right now, right? The devs have been pretty outspoken with the fact that they do plan on putting out like more pinnacle content. Again, the game did just come out, so that's not a crazy thing to think.
I gotta say, I have really enjoyed my time with Last Epoch these past few weeks. It does a few things very well, in my opinion, that I think other ARPGs and just other loot games in general could really learn from and take.
I think one thing that's really nice about Last Epoch is it's so visually appealing for such a cheap game. Like it's a $35 game, right? And it's so visually appealing where it doesn't need to be. But the visual appeal helps so much.
Take into consideration for their own games or for future games or whatever. Really just another great example of the benefits of competition in any genre. Here are a few of the things in particular that I think Last Epoch does really well that I really enjoyed. So first there's the end game, which in Last Epoch this consists primarily of grinding these things called Monoliths of Fate. These are broken up into...
Yeah, but that is the entire end game, and a lot of people are kind of upset by that, which I don't fully agree with because again, like the devs have been saying that they are putting out pinnacle content literally the next patch. So, I mean, we'll see. I don't feel like that's too much to complain about, to be honest. The empowered monolith system is good. I mean, you have basically infinite potential to push, or at least as far as your own build can push as high as it can go. And there is so many different builds that are being theory crafted right now throughout the game. Like there are still builds that are being found out from items that people thought were previously useless.
to these different sections, areas that are themed around these alternate timelines. And when you begin a timeline,
The
you
timeline
start
stuff
at
is
its
cool.
center, and then you move your way outward, progressing from one echo to the next. Each echo is kind of like a mini dungeon. These normally take just a few minutes to clear, and usually you'll have to complete some sort of basic task, like kill a bunch.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as you get efficient with this stuff, it takes 2 to 3 minutes to get through each echo. As soon as you start getting like semi good at this stuff, it takes about 2 to 3 minutes.
Of enemies until you reveal the boss location, then go kill the boss, or destroy various structures that are spread across the map, or go to and defend.
I think that's a good and bad thing, by the way. It really takes it takes you out of the whole immersion by being in and out so fast. But at the same time, it is nice that you're in and out so fast, because then you're not locked into something forever, right? Like, if you only have the time to do a few things, you can get probably 5 monoliths in. Where you can't do that in a lot of other games.
Defend a particular location from a few waves of enemies. But what I find interesting here
Five
is
monoliths
that
taking
each one
about
of
10
these
minutes.
echoes actually come with their very own bonus reward category, and you see that ahead of time. So before you enter an echo, you can actually tell what sort of extra loot you're going to get at the end.
It is very nice because each separate monolith has its own specific thing that drops. So say you're looking for boots, for example, there is a specific monolith area that will drop boots as their bonus loot. So you can target farm anything you want. It's very nice. The way they have it set up is very smart.
This could be a particular gear slot, piles of gold, bonus experience, crafting resources, or keys. And the monolith timelines aren't just a single straight path, but multiple paths with dungeons, which are those echoes, branching in several different directions. So the end result here is you are moving in whatever direction you want based on the bonus rewards that you happen to be looking for. So if I'm feeling like I'm low on gold, I can keep progressing towards echoes that reward extra gold at the end. Or if I want to level faster, I'll pick ones that reward bonus experience. Whatever it is that.
And by the way, gold is completely useless in this game unless you're in the Merchant's Guild. I think the Merchant's Guild is good for the end game. Like when you're really pushing separate builds. But I think most people are in COF. Most people are just in the thing that makes them drop extra loot as opposed to them go buying it. So when you're in COF, gold is completely useless. The only thing that you would use it for is buying extra stash tabs.
That you're after, you can just work towards those rewards while also at the same time doing the general end game gear grind of killing things, opening chests, and looking for gear. And there's additional layers to the system as well, like the fact that every single echo will boost enemies with some modifier, making them a little more difficult by granting offensive or defensive enhancements.
Yeah, it's cool as well because the farther you get out from the center, they actually get stronger as well.
Echo you complete
so you're
also
not just
works
facing the
towards
same
filling
difficulty.
This timeline stability bar, which you can kind of think of as an area progression. As you complete echoes, as you clear those dungeons, you'll fill the bar, and then this unlocks these timeline quest echoes, of which there are 3. At the very end, you have the final boss encounter for that timeline, and that gives you some nice rewards. But that's just the whole loop. You are progressing.
The really nice thing about the empowered echoes is you don't have to go through the other 2 quests. You can just go kill the boss. So in your regular monoliths, you have to go through 2 quests to like find the boss, and then you go kill the boss. Where in the empowered ones, you just go kill the boss, and then it's fine. You do need a lot more stability, which makes sense. However, it is very nice that it is set up that way, so you don't have to do the other 2 quests just for fun, I guess.
Out, moving through all of these echoes, collecting loot along the way as you unlock the quest echoes, and then eventually do those 3 quests to fight the final boss of that timeline, and then rinse and repeat. You do it over again. And then there's also
the entire end game really is farming out the specific blessings you want, because you'll probably be next to Fully Abyss by the time you get every blessing you want. Like, it takes quite a while.
The final layers of corruption and empowered monoliths, and both of these are simply systems that make the whole thing harder in exchange for you getting better loot.
Which, by the way, you have to be in because the regular monoliths do cap out at 50 corruption, and the empowered monoliths start at 100 corruption. So you do want to be in Empowered literally as soon as you can. As soon as you can survive Empowered, you want to be in Empowered.
I've enjoyed really about how Last Epoch has done its end game, as kind of simple as it might be, and this is one of the big complaints for the game, but I gotta say, what I like about it is that the whole process gives you some agency along the way. At the end of the day, you're still playing an ARPG, your goal is smashing through hordes of enemies as you wait for your ideal loot drops, just like any other ARPG. But during that process, with this system of echoes and how it does its bonus rewards, you're getting to sort of select what categories you get.
I can't wait for the future of this game because it does so many things that are so good compared to other games. So many things that Last Epoch does is substantially better than both PoE and D4. So many things. So I'm actually very excited for the end game.
For these extra bonus loots every couple of minutes, every echo you clear, every dungeon you run through. And sort of along those same lines is this next system where you get some sort of target farming thanks to the faction system, in particular the Circle of Fortune faction. This lets you choose additional target bonus loot.
Yeah, this is what I was talking about with COF and MG, your Circle of Fortune and your Merchant's Guild. So one you get to trade and one you get to have extra loot drop. I think it's a very smart system.
Drops as you play. You have these quests called prophecies. They'll ask you to complete some objective, normally killing a certain boss or type of enemy, and then either in a particular timeline or having to meet certain other conditions like a corruption level. But the TLDR is...
So it doesn't look like he has a lot of favor right now, but you get a lot, and I'm pretty sure... I don't know, but I'm pretty sure you get a lot more favor the higher that your corruption is. Because I've gone in with like 150,000, like 100,000, 150,000 corruption, I'm pretty sure, and you just get to buy so many prophecies and level up so fast. Like level up your faction like bar really fast because you earn so much favor.
Is you select from an assortment of quests, picking the ones that have.
And that is how you level up your thing. By the way, is by spending favor, because you earn it at a 2-to-1 ratio. And then you can buy the things that make the things more expensive, which then in turn give you more reputation.
The loot rewards you want, which these will be unique and exalted pieces of gear for any of the gear slots. And then once you complete that quest objective, that gear just literally drops straight at your feet. You don't have to go cash it in anywhere. It just appears once you actually finish whatever the task is. On top of that, there's also an extra layer of a reputation system for the faction.
That's how you get those
as
like
you
loot
play
explosions.
and engage with the Circle of Fortune by spending favor, you level up with the faction, and each reputation level grants you some really nice rewards, boosting your loot drops, like a chance to find rarer loot, to get loot with better stats, and the ability to get tons of bonus loot, like doubling the rewards that you get from any prophecy you complete. Or there's a reputation level that once you unlock it, anytime a single set item would drop, it instead drops the entire set. So between the Circle of Fortune faction and how the monoliths work, I've really never felt more in control of farming for items in
I think the set thing is for the most part useless, minus a few
the reputation boost alone in the Circle of Fortune, I think, feel really good.
Sorry,
like when
one
set item drops, you get the entire set instead. Are you kidding me? It's awesome. It's really cool. Now there is another faction in the game.
It's just that most sets are useless for 99% of builds. Like there's only a few fairly niche builds that actually use sets, and it's none of the meta builds.
I believe it's called the Merchant's Guild. I have heard that technically this is better for getting the loot that you want because it simply gives you access to a player auction house where you can buy and sell gear with other players just using the in-game gold currency. But, you know, personally, I normally don't really love engaging in these big auction houses, these trading systems in these games. I prefer just finding stuff via playing myself. And obviously, especially if you're playing solo self-found or if you're playing the game offline, Circle of Fortune is going to be the one to go with. And I think it's an interesting system.
Well, I mean, it's going to be your only option. But also, Merchant's Guild is... I mean, unfortunately, I think Merchant's Guild is the end game. It is just objectively better. It would take you so long to fill out Abyss character with Circle of Fortune because everything is RNG, whereas you could just go buy the thing you want, right?
system. So much so that I almost wish that the game just gave you both, right? That you had the Circle of Fortune and the player trading auction house, but I understand they're trying to make us make meaningful choices here. They become less meaningful when there's a one clearly better choice for your goal, which is gearing. But again, they're circumstantially and depending on how you play as a player. For me personally, I don't even care that I'm more likely to get my best in slot gear faster if I went with the Merchant's Guild and just bought gold from the auction house from other players. I just don't really like playing these games that way, so I'm happy with the Circle of Fortune, and I think the way they've done the Circle of Fortune is really, really cool. Another thing I like...
The unfortunate part about the Merchant's Guild is there's a lot of gold sellers in the game, which I don't even fully understand because I don't think you can trade gold, so I'm not sure how they do that. But there is a lot of gold sellers in the game, and they literally are incentivized to exist because it jacks up the price of everything in the Merchant's Guild, which they are then buying and then jacking up the prices of. Like, I've played the game a fair bit, and I've bought, I think, 40 or 50 stash tabs, and I still have like 5 million gold. But I've seen things where like your biz items are like 18, 20 million gold, so I don't know.
Like in this game is the crafting system really awesome. So every single piece of gear that you find in the game from blue up to purple rarity comes with a certain amount of what is called forging potential. So you'll have a piece of loot drop with some random assortment of 1 to 4 affixes on it and intrinsic stats as well as a set number of forging potential. And
it would be nice if the forging potential was a little bit nicer to you, like to the player. I can't tell you the amount of items that I've just completely bricked because changing one thing, even with the scroll or whatever that reduces that has a 25% chance to not use any forging potential. The amount of times I've bricked an item that just it uses all of its potential in like 1 or 2 changes is actually quite frustrating.
then and using that forging potential, you have a huge variety of options for what you can do with your gear to make it better. So at the base level, the simple thing you can do is enhance the stats on an item. So using some of your forging potential and a shard, you can add more value of whatever particular affix you want. So if you get a chest piece that drops that has agility on it, using agility shards and a little bit of forging potential, you can then just add more agility to that item. But then there are all of these support glyphs that give you a whole bunch more possibilities. So there's the glyph of hope, which gives you a 25% chance to not spend any forging potential when boosting the stats of an affix, which lets you get even more improvements put on that item. Or the glyph of chaos,
which you should always have the glyph of hopes in there, by the way. You get so many, you should literally always have one in there. There should never be a time where you do not have a glyph of hope in there. So always make sure that you do.
Which will then replace an affix of your choice with a random affix of the same category. And this is obviously useful if you get a gear drop that has an affix on it that isn't useful for you. It's not useful for your build or your class or whatever. You can use a glyph of chaos to randomly replace that with a new affix of the same category. And then there's also things like the glyph of despair, which actually has a chance to seal an affix, which moves it into its very own slot, leaving the prior slot free. So the simple version of this is any item can have a max of 4 attribute stats on it, but if you use this seal function, you can take one of them, put it off in its own separate category, and then that 4th slot then gets freed up. So all of a sudden you have a gear piece with 5 affix slots on it using something like the glyph of despair. And there's other similar systems with other mechanics.
Yeah, but chances are you probably use most or all of your forging potential just to move it, so you won't have any left to put anything else on there. Or if you do, it'll just be like a tier 1, tier 2 thing. Which is the unfortunate part about the system, but I get why that is a thing.
In the crafting system as well. It's fairly complicated, but once you get your hands in and working with it, it's really awesome. And again, plays into that player agency that I love so much that the last Epoch does well. And all of this is fueled by these affix shards that I mentioned a moment ago. So how these work is while playing the game, you'll find shards as loot drops, with there being shards for every single type of affix in the game. Every core attribute stat, all of the resistances, the offensive and defensive enhancements like bonus damage, movement speed, crit chance, crit damage, life leech. There's also plus to skills. Everything that could show up as an affix on a gear will have shards you'll collect as you play. Also, if you find an item that has affixes you like on it, but you don't want to equip that item because it isn't exactly what you want, you can actually use this thing called the Rune of Shattering to destroy the item, which will then pull a random assortment of that.
Yeah, so the Rune of Shattering is good, but the Rune of Removal is actually quite a lot better. So the Rune of Shattering, say you have a tier 7, which means it's like 7 shards deep, right? With the Rune of Shattering, you'll get 127 shards, like just like a random assortment. But the Rune of Removal gives you the exact number that is the thing. So like if it's a tier 5 affix and you use a Rune of Removal on it, you get 5 shards. Whereas with the Rune of Shattering, you'd get 1 to 5 shards. So the Rune of Removal is actually better for like specific things if you're low.
At items
or just for like high quality affixes
and turn it into affix shards put into your collection that you can then later use on another piece of gear. And there are additional modifier runes as well that let you re-roll the value of affixes. If you happen to get a bunch of low rolls, you can re-roll an item's implicit stats. You can remove a random affix, freeing up a slot to be replaced with something else. There's also this thing called the Rune of Ascendancy, which lets you change a regular item into a unique item, that orange rarity of the same category. And then there's also the legendary gear, which has you taking those highly valuable orange uniques and then combining them with purple gear, adding additional affixes to the already powerful uniques. Just
I really like how they did the entire system.
I know there's a lot here, but it's yet another aspect of Last Epoch. It just plays so much into the player agency, where I feel like I have a lot of control and flexibility over the gearing process, and I've really enjoyed that. Oh, also, did I mention the game stash tabs? It has stash tabs. As many as you want, really. Who would have thought that was possible? I've seen players with...
It does have 100 stash tabs, but I did see that they're looking at reducing the amount of size that you get.
I think, I don't know, like hundreds of stash tabs on their account. You are able to name and color code these. You can put them in their very own sections, these categories that have subtrees underneath them. There's also a...
And by the way, you don't have to load everybody's stash when you load into the game.
Search feature that will then highlight any gear that has whatever word you searched for in it or on it. And you can just keep adding more and more. This is a gold sink. It will cost an ever-increasing amount of gold. But as someone who's just playing kind of semi-casually, that's how I describe myself at this point. I already have like over 20 stash tabs, and it's more than I can use. I got a bunch of them that are just...
Again, I think I have 40 or 50, and I'm only using like 20. Like, you just stop picking up useless gear at a point, and you really only start picking up gear with legendary potential.
Sitting there empty. And boy, it doesn't cause the game to explode. You don't have to spend real world money. How did they do it? I don't know. Somehow Last Epoch figured out how to make stash tabs work. It is an absolute miracle. Oh, and quickly, I do want to give a shout out as well to this system before I get into the big one that is a real what I love about this game. But I want to mention the skill customization in Last Epoch. It's phenomenal. Every single skill in the game has its very own skill tree that you can specialize in. These trees each have like 25 to 30 nodes.
Yeah, it's crazy how a $35 game has this much customization, and Diablo 4 doesn't. It's crazy how a small studio like this that didn't exist like 5 years ago, or it was founded in 2017, I think. Like, the studio was founded in 2017. It's a brand new studio, and they were still able to make this. It's crazy how spending so much money on a video game and you get a tiny little twig. In the case of D4, right?
That let you enhance, upgrade, and in some cases even totally change how the skills function. You've got 5 skills that you can have on your hotbar, and then you can specialize in 5 skills, but those don't have to be the same either. So you could have active hotbar skills, but then specialize in a skill that isn't on your hotbar, but triggers off of other skills. What it comes down to is there's just so much potential here, especially when combined with this gear and the affix system. This appears to be a really good game for people who want to try out different funky builds and do a bunch of theory crafting. Now, that isn't me.
Yeah, it is so much better than D4 in almost every single way. The only thing that I really love about D4 is the graphical fidelity, and it does graphically have that Blizzard polish. Blizzard is always known for how their games look. But, you know, unfortunately that doesn't matter if the game is shit, right? There's no ARPG, and there won't be for many years to come, I think, that looks as polished as D4. I love the way D4 looks.
normally just use build guides and maybe make a few tweaks in here and there. I just don't have the time or really the desire to spend the hours of time theory crafting and testing different builds. I'll let other people do that, and then if they post them online, I'll check them out. If they're cool and I have fun, great, we're all having a good time. But even though I don't
Yeah, and that is the good thing about build guides, right? Like they're meant for people that are not terminally online, and they're meant for people that don't have 8, 10, 12, 15 hours a day to spend on a video game. I don't understand the hate people have against build guides. I don't understand it. That being said, I would probably recommend, with PoE being the exception, I would probably recommend if you're playing an ARPG, play around with everything first. Like go through your first character, make your own build so you can understand how things interact and you can understand how things happen. Because that will let you understand why build guides choose specific things in the future.
personally go through the process of making my own builds, I do think it's really cool.
Also, the nice thing about Last Epoch is almost anything can clear up to empowered monoliths. Almost anything. Unless you're making a build and you're literally picking like antagonistic things that don't have anything to do with each other, you're probably not going to even get through the campaign bosses. But the campaign bosses really are meant to be like resistance checks and health checks anyway. And they're not hard. Like you just move out of the things and then you won't die. Most builds can do that, and if you have a room temperature IQ, you can do that.
I also think it's super important in these games, especially for their long-term health, and that this game has it, and that is really great. But the last feature is probably the thing that I've enjoyed most about Last Epoch, and that is its loot filter. Now, if you're not a hardcore ARPG player, if you don't have thousands of hours of Path of Exile, you might be thinking, excuse me, a loot filter? That's your favorite thing? Yeah.
Yeah, the loot filter is probably the best thing about this game, hands down.
It is, and let me explain why. This is actually, I think, super important. So over the years, playing games, loot games, let's just mention Diablo, right?
Like, everything else aside, look at how good this game looks. And D4 does get things right. The graphical fidelity is one of them. The transmog system is another. Being able to like actually make sure all of your gear matches, even in color, is so important.
So playing season after season of Diablo 3, and then last year spending hundreds of hours with Diablo 4, I continuously noticed that there's one thing in particular that keeps dragging those experiences down, and ultimately one thing...
I mean, there's a lot of things that drag the experience down in D4. It's not the fact that it doesn't have a loot filter, although that is one of them, but it's not the main issue in the game.
That is one of the reasons I eventually stopped playing. In both games, I would just get so sick and tired of having to manually filter through mounds of garbage gear all the time. Now, these are loot games. Part of the experience is going through the bad loot until you get the good loot, but in both Diablo 3 Seasons and Diablo 4 at release when I played it, come the end game, it really feels like I'm spending like half of my playtime looking at gear in my inventory to check if the stats are...
You probably spend more than half your time. You spend most of your time looking at useless gear.
Applicable to my character, if they're applicable to my build, if the rolls on those stats are better than the rolls that I already have. It feels like half my playtime is spent doing this, and I don't love it. In Diablo 3, I'd run a couple of greater rifts, my inventory's full, sit in town for a few minutes, checking every piece of gear. In Diablo 4, run a nightmare dungeon, check my inventory. Go to a Helltide, check my inventory. Hop in for a world boss or a stronghold.
Helltides are garbage, by the way.
Check my inventory. I am just doing it, but I'm not meaning to just pick on Diablo here because this does apply to the larger genre of these more loot-focused games, like playing games like The Division, playing Warframe, Outriders, Destiny, Anthem, Borderlands. I could go on and on. In a lot of these games, 99% of the time, the loot that I'm looking at is garbage, doesn't fit my build, doesn't have good enough stat rolls, is for the wrong class, whatever it is. I'm wanting to spend more of my time playing the game, enjoying the content, blowing things up, hacking and slashing.
To be fair to Borderlands, because I love Borderlands as games. They're basically ARPGs, right? They're looter shooters. The things that I love about Borderlands is it doesn't have a loot filter, at least not that I can remember. The guns that drop are so easy to tell if they're better or not.
flashing. But instead, in a lot of these games, I feel more like an accountant who's sitting there comparing numbers all day.
Yeah.
And I just don't love it. But the loot filter in Last Epoch lets you see as much or as little as you want, pretty much. You can filter out for things like rarities, hiding all the common and blue gear.
Again, the loot filter in Last Epoch is one of the best systems I've ever seen. Sorry, one of the best loot filters I've ever seen in any video game ever.
Here, you can filter for particular attributes, only showing the drops that have the exact stats you need for your build. You can filter to show gear that's great for sharding, gear that's good for upgrading, gear with perfect rolls, gear with just below perfect rolls if you're not quite there yet. You can also set this priority list, so maybe you will filter out all blue gear, except if a blue piece drops and it has a great affix that you could break down into a shard and use to enhance another piece of gear with, then it will show that particular blue drop while also still hiding all of the other blue drops. You can even adjust the color, boldness, and font size of the...
There is so much custom... It's kind of funny because there's more customizability in the loot filter than there is in all of Diablo 4. Like, just straight up. The amount of options and availability you have in that loot filter is huge. And that in itself makes Last Epoch so much better. Just the fact that it has a loot filter that is that in-depth is so good.
Gear that drops for stats that you really want. So for example, as you get towards endgame, you'll start seeing a ton of uniques, this orange gear, and uniques are great, but what you're really looking for is uniques with like 2 or more legendary potential.
Yeah.
And then once you get those great uniques that you need for your build that have high legendary potential, you're then going to want to take the purple gear and smash it together to form a legendary item. But just like yellow gear, purple gear has a random assortment of stats and doesn't always have what you need, but you can set up a filter so that you're only seeing purple gear that really has the best in slot combination of stats you want. The filter in this game, as far as I can tell, lets you see pretty much exactly and only what you want to see, what you're looking for, and more or less as free or strict as you want it to be.
Yeah.
I think it's amazing. So like right now, for example,
Yeah,
I'm playing a Falconer.
so
That's my main character, and I have a filter specifically for this character. So I'm only going to see drops that have the exact type of stats I'm looking for, the plus skills that I want, the crit chance, the minion damage, the dexterity, the defensive stats, move speed on boots, etc. It is a little loose right now because I'm sort of at, I guess, what you consider mid to late game. I'm happy to also have less than best in slot gear because apparently this class is pretty popular and strong. I picked it because I liked the bird. Turns out,
Yeah, Falconer is easily one of the best builds in the game, and it's not even close. They're like the builds that are better are so much better, but the Falconer build, especially, like I think it's dive bomb. I also have Falconer, but I'm not running dive bomb. I'm running traps. The dive bomb build is so far and above everything else as everything else that it is above is so much higher than everything else as well.
it ended up being one of the broken builds. Oh well, it happens sometimes.
I mean, it's not
rather
broken,
than
it's
having
just
to
strong.
manually check every single piece of loot that drops, 90% of which isn't good for me, I can just see the ones that have that combination of attributes I want for smashing into uniques and adjust the filter so it automatically shows me exactly that. It is just such an amazing quality of life feature and practically eliminates one of the main issues I have with many loot games, as I said moments ago, that is spending a massive chunk of my time staring at my inventory, looking at gear on the...
Because the loot filter lets you know if something is useful or could potentially be useful literally when it drops. Because if it's not, you won't see it.
Ground, filtering through garbage instead of playing the game. And I know
Sorry, my
that
nose
this is
is,
part
like,
of the experience.
really
It's part of
bothering me.
loot games, going through the bad gear to get to the good. I don't want it to be a major part. I don't even want it to be a third of the time that I spend. I want to play the game and then get the loot, not spend half my time looking at loot.
You want to spend the game actually playing the game. I think my food is here though, so I'm going to be back in 2 seconds. don't even think I'm going to edit this out. I'm just going to leave it in. Maybe I will. We'll see. Oh, that's not what I meant to do.
Loot and half my time playing the game. That's, again, just a personal preference thing here. Now, the downside to this system and this particular loot filter in Last Epoch is it's pretty complicated to set up with a lot of rules and menus to go through. But once you understand how it works, it is an incredibly useful tool, and frankly, you can get away as well with not fully understanding it, as there are plenty of online sources and guides with links to loot filters that you can just literally copy and paste into your game. Just look up your...
Yeah, how they have the paste bin set up, where you literally just copy and paste it into the game, and then it's in the game. And these are loot filters from people who either make the builds you're looking at, or actually who know what they're talking about. And then the nice thing about those is you still have complete control. Like, once it's in the game, it's not like you can't edit anything. You have complete control. So as soon as it's in your game, and if you want to make it tighter, or make it looser, you have complete control over that.
Your build, look up a loot filter from a popular guide. There you go. You have a good filter for the class and the build that you're playing. Now, I know Last Epoch isn't the first game to have something like this. From what I understand, Path of Exile also has a pretty good loot filter, but I'm just speaking, and all I can do is speak from my personal experience. I have played Path of Exile, but it was like 10 years ago. It was when the game first came into early access. I'm pretty sure all they had for endgame at that point was continuously playing through the campaign. Like, they didn't have this whole system of maps and these Ubers and everything that Path of Exile has for now, this totally built up and fleshed out endgame. It didn't have that. And maybe it had the loot filter, but if it was, I was completely oblivious. The point is, I'm not saying Last Epoch is the first game to come up with something like this, because I know it isn't, but it's my first real, genuine experience with something like a loot filter, and I feel like it's a game changer, really. It honestly completely changes my opinion about loot games. I think any loot game that showers you in garbage gear, I feel like should have some variation of a
Hold on, what is happening? Hello? Hello? Why am I dropping frames so much? What is going on? I started eating and my computer blew up. Like, what the fuck? I'm just gonna give it a second. I don't know what's happening right now. I don't know why this is dropping so many frames. Is it caught back up now? What is going on? Hello? Yeah, everything else says it's fine. There we go, it's back up. I think my internet just fucking shit itself. That was annoying. That was very annoying. That's frustrating.
Loot filter or some filtering system. It doesn't even necessarily need to be as complex or finely tuned as this or as what's in Path of Exile, but there should be options in every loot game to filter out stuff you absolutely do not want to see and spend time checking every piece of gear to realize 99% of it isn't exactly what you need. In fact, it's all just garbage. Obviously, it can't just show you only what you need. It's part.
Yeah, just like harping on the loot system continuously. I get it. D4 needs a better one. Everybody knows that. The one in last Epoch is good.
Of this genre, and it's all a balancing act, just like developers choosing how much gear drops for you is part of that whole balancing act.
Yep.
How much gear they allow you to have in a loot filter would be part of it as well. And I also understand that some of these larger games that are trying to appeal to a larger audience are probably going to be a little scared to have a system like the loot filter that's in Last Epoch, and I'm presuming the loot filter in Path of Exile is similarly kind of complex and to understand and get started and navigate. I get why, like, Blizzard for Diablo 4 doesn't want to have this, like, super complex system of all the stuff to go through in their games because they feel...
Yeah, I don't, and I really think that that's a bad argument. I really do. Because they can just make the user interface really simple. Also, it is Blizzard's fault, right? Like, they have so many affixes on gear that's literally the same thing, just worded different. Literally the same thing. Why do you have 17 different variations of damage to CC'd enemies? Why is that a thing? Condense it all into one. You could have like 20 affixes instead of the 75 or however many fucking affixes you have, and then make a loot filter based off of that, and people would be so much happier. That would straight up fix the loot system. I mean, we'll see next season because they say they're going to be doing a loot overhaul, but
feel like it's not going to appeal to
a
wide audience. It's going to be too complicated and maybe frustrating to them. But I would say give your audience some credit. Don't just assume everyone's an idiot, and have this system in this game. If people want to engage with it, they can.
Yes, thank you. Stop treating your target audience like children. Like, at least that's such a bad excuse. Like, I don't get it. That's such a bad excuse. Give your audience some sort of credit, and at the very least put it in their game, and the people who want to use it will use it, and the people who don't won't.
If it is too complicated, if it is too frustrating, then people can avoid it, right? And then you can also have various levels to it. So you can have a built-in loot filter with a guided system where Blizzard themselves would have an automatic filter that you could enable for your particular class and your particular build. Or if you want...
I don't know if that would be a good idea, because then you're letting Blizzard decide what's good for you and what's not, and you shouldn't do that. I think that might be good for... Actually, maybe a majority of people, because I think, let's be honest, a majority of people aren't online looking up guides and stuff. But I don't know. I think that's tough to say.
You could look up guides and you could tune it further to be more accurate to whatever the current meta is and to what you...
Yeah, but again, is that most people don't want to look up guides, right? Most people just want to play the game, and then they're just playing the game. Like, that's just what it is. Like, most people don't want to have to go online. Most people don't want to have to do these things, so they don't. Like, think of all the guys who work 10 hours a day and have 15 kids with 7 different wives. They don't want to have to go online to look up and research a video game. They just want to come home and play the video game. Maybe they should be taking care of their kids, but, you know, it is what it is.
You should be looking for that whatever Blizzard implemented didn't exactly pan out. You know what I'm saying? But again, I'm not just here to pick on Blizzard. I'm not just here to pick on Diablo. I think this is
We should be. They fucking suck right now.
Applicable to a lot of the loot games that I've played. There just always seems to come a time in those games after playing and getting to end game and really getting to the point where you're showered with loot, where I just get so fed up of constantly staring at my inventory. Just literally, like in a lot of these games, it's like a third to 50% of my time is looking at my inventory.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest issues of Diablo 4. It's not every issue, right? It is one of the issues with D4. The fact that half of your playtime is in town looking at gear that could or could not be useful to you because you have to sort through 75 different affixes that are all the exact same thing, and one's a 0.03% damage increase. The fact that you have to do that's retarded. It is really, really dumb. Make it so all of those are condensed, and then give us even a really simple loot filter. It doesn't even need to be as good as Last Epoch's. Last Epoch loot filter is one of the best I've ever seen in games. because of how much things you can change in the loot filter and customize to your own liking.
Instead of playing the game. And usually it's around that point. I'm not saying it's the only reason, but usually around that point is when I end up just getting fed up and quit these games because I don't like doing that. I liked the point where I was leveling, and
that's actually part or most of the reason I stopped playing D4. In my opinion, like the ARPG endgame is the same in every single ARPG because it's just so repetitive. It's nothing against it's nothing against D4 specifically. It's just every ARPG has the same loop. And by the way, going back to what was being said earlier with like Borderlands, it's the same loop. You're still doing the same thing in the end game, right? Because it does come down to one thing being more efficient than everything else for getting, in Borderlands example, the most guns, or in ARPG's example with the most possible loot drops, or the one type of loot that you want. Like in D4 is Shaco that everybody wants, right?
Just equipping everything with a green arrow. When I was just leveling and most of my time was playing, that's my favorite part. And then when I get to the end game and most of my time staring at inventory and looking at gear, that's my least favorite part. And the loot filter helps to alleviate and address that.
I would unironically enjoy D4 so much more if they condensed down the loot and made a loot filter. I think D4 would be in a substantially better state because gear is most of the issue. It's not the end game because, for fuck's sakes, because every ARPG endgame is the same. It's all the exact same. And I will die on this hill. In D4, you just happen to be killing Duriel over and over and over again. What are you doing in PoE? You're doing maps over and over and over again. What are you doing in Last Epoch? You're doing monoliths over and over and over and over again. There's straight up no difference. It's just Blizzard bad, therefore D4 bad, and people hate on it. But I don't think endgame is the issue. I think loot's the issue.
This, and I really like it. So yeah, I may be winding down with Last Epoch, but I am so glad that I spent the past few weeks playing. I think this game does some things very, very well, and I hope other loot games take inspiration from it, giving players a greater sense of agency with the end game grind.
I really hope Blizzard gets back to the stealing ideas that they used to do, because that's when Blizzard was better.
Do things like targeted farming, as well as doing the overall farming loop. This in-depth gear crafting system, not being restrictive with storage, especially in games that have you wanting to hold on to lots and lots of items, but especially, and finally, I think in games that shower you with loot, consistently drop a large number of items for you to look through. Man, this highly customizable loot filter has been such a welcome relief. Gotta say, Last Epoch, best $35 I've spent on entertainment in a long time. So well done, 11th hour games. Excited to see how...
It's the same as Helldivers 2, by the way. Like, you can get both Helldivers 2 and Last Epoch for the price of the fucking horse that Blizzard put into the game, right? It is a joke. It is a complete joke.
This game grows and expands in the future, but you're off to a great start, and I'm looking forward to seeing it in the years ahead. That does it for me today, though. Thank you guys as always for watching. Hope you enjoyed. I'll see you next time. Take it easy.
The most
That's not what I wanted to do.
All right, so
I think I probably agree with most things in this video. There are some things I do disagree with, but I mean, realistically, one of the best things that Last Epoch is able to pull off is the loot filter. And I think more games need to follow suit. From your looter shooters from games like Borderlands to Diablo 4. I'm not super confident on talking about PoE because I haven't played it too much. But I do also understand that PoE has a pretty decent loot filter. That's my understanding. I mean, I could be wrong, but... Again, I don't think... D4's issue is not the end game. D4's issue is the loot. Because again, every single ARPG it's decent. Yeah, I mean, I can't really talk about it too much because I've spent maybe 30 hours in PoE. So like really that's leveling content. But again, what I was saying is D4's issue is not endgame, because every single ARPG, including your looter shooters like Borderlands and stuff like that, is the exact same. The endgame's not the issue in D4. The loot is the issue in D4. And you'd be able to garner in so much more attention just by fixing the loot. Dumb down your gear. You don't need 15 affixes that are the exact same affix. Like, why do you have 10 different damage to CC'd enemies? I don't understand. I think dumbing down the loot, which, I mean, we'll see what they actually do in the next season. We've had actually no information as to what the next season is going to be or what the loot change is going to have happen, but I don't know. I really do think them just dumbing down the loot is going to improve the game substantially. Unironically, the loot is the issue. It's not the end game. Maybe that's a bad take, but that just is what I think. It's a good video. I've seen a few of this guy's videos. They're good. He puts in a decent amount of effort into them, and I do appreciate that.